Well, Linda, we've been going back and forth for a while now. I'm glad we could finally do the dang thing.
I know. Yeah. It's like life is so busy, I mean, I have kids, I work a corporate job, I volunteer, I'm just,
Yeah.
I mean, it's all good stuff. It's just a lot of it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Same here. Same here. It's
You
just
know?
job and life, right?
Yeah.
How many kids you have?
I have three. I have a stepdaughter who's grown, and then I have an 18-year-old who's there's probably a picture of him on my wall. He's a swimmer. And I have a 15-year-old, both boys, and but my 18-year-old just verbally accepted to swim at Virginia Tech.
Oh my gosh! Congratulations.
Yeah, he's 6'5", 220 pounds. So he's going to a prep school in Florida for his last year. Long story short, but New Jersey shut down for swim, really, for competitive swimmers for almost 2 years. And so he was going to this program down there that they have a bunch of Olympians like oh gosh. Caleb Dressel, and have graduated from this program called the Bowles School. It's a day school, prep school, and also a boarding school. And so he got in to go for his last year of high school, and it made all the difference in the world with his swim.
Really?
Yeah, we miss him, but we see him a lot. Like we have a condo down in St. Augustine, and we're back and forth. It's in Jacksonville, Florida, where he is. So, yeah, yeah.
Wow. You talked about his measurable. That's not a boy. That's a man. That's a.
He's a man. He's a man child, Tanner. He's a man. He's still a kid.
Yeah,
He's
I know.
still,
Yeah, yeah.
he's still on the payroll.
Yep, yep. No, Virginia Tech's a great school. Many times going up there. My wife went to Virginia Tech.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I've never
so
been there. It looks beautiful, but it's out in the middle of nowhere.
it is out in the middle of nowhere. There's
Yeah,
cows actually out just outside the campus there,
yeah,
but
yeah. I
which I
believe.
actually appreciated being from a farm town myself. But no, many drives from Cherry Point, North Carolina, 7 hours to go to Virginia
Oh
Tech for
gosh, yeah,
roughly 3 to 4 years. So yeah,
yeah,
no, good memories of the school.
yeah.
Well, Linda, you're a Navy veteran. And the first question we always ask here on Borne the Battle is, when did you know that the military was going to be the next step in your life?
So I was 17 in high school, and I didn't have a lot of choices really because my parents were divorced, a lot of just crazy stuff going on in my family, and I had like this undying desire to get out on my own. And I think when you grow up maybe in a difficult situation, obviously you want better for yourself, and I just wanted to impact my own life and make choices in my own life. And I knew that my parents didn't have the money for me to go to college,
Yeah.
and my sister had actually gone in. She was a year older than me. She had gone in the Navy, and I just thought it was a great, opportunity. And I had this thing about airports and aviation. My mom was a reservation and ticket agent for a number of years, and I don't know even know why now, but I just loved going to the airport. I just loved the excitement of that. And
Mm.
so I went and down and talked to the recruiter on my own, without my parents' knowledge, probably initially, and got signed up to be an air traffic controller.
So difficult situation, wanting to break a
Yeah,
cycle. I can completely identify with that. Wanting
yeah,
to wanting to not fall into the same cycle. No, absolutely.
yeah.
Now you were a Mustang in the Navy.
Hmm.
Started out enlisted again as an air traffic controller, like you talked about, and then received an ROTC
Yep.
scholarship. How did the scholarship come about? And okay, real quick, as an air traffic controller, I always think of Die Hard 2, and that
Yeah.
was probably around the same time that you were an air traffic controller.
Yeah.
Um,
Although, so a little bit different with me. I wasn't in a tower. I was a radar controller
okay.
stationed in Hawaii on Ford Island. So I was at this facility called FastFac, the Fleet Area Control and Surveillance Facilities. And we controlled all the warning areas, like all the training, all the warning areas for the aviation squadrons that would come out and dogfight and, do aggressor stuff. And
Oh wow.
yeah, so I was there for about a year, and my senior chief saw something in me that I didn't see in myself at that age. I was 18 at that point, and he recommended for me to go to this program called the Boost program, the Broadened Opportunity for Officer Selection and Training, and it
Wow.
was in San Diego, California, and it was for basically economically deprived kids, which I don't know if I really was that, but people that were in the military that needed a step up. And
They saw something in you,
yeah,
and they were like, hey, this is a good opportunity for someone that.
yeah,
Yeah, gotcha. No,
yeah.
absolutely.
And so I applied, got accepted, was only in Hawaii for like a year and a half, and then went to San
Bummer.
Diego. Yeah, I know. And then went to San Diego, another wonderful spot.
Not a
Of
bad, yeah,
course.
not a
Yeah,
bad thing to trade
yeah,
out. No.
yeah. So, the Marine Corps and Army, I don't think have as many great bases as like the Air Force and the Navy. So, throughout my career, I went to lots of great places, but so I went to San Diego for a couple years, then got a RTOC scholarship to the University of Idaho, the Vandals in Idaho, in
Mm-hmm.
Moscow, Idaho, and
Mm-hmm.
we're from the East Coast, and my parents are like, Ida, what? Where in the heck? Why?
The Great
Why?
Potato State.
Why?
Uh,
Yes.
I'm from Washington State, so
Oh,
I am
the
very familiar with
Wazoo.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
Wazoo,
Yep,
Pullman,
Pullman, yep.
Eastern Washington.
Yeah, yeah. I
But
love the Pacific Northwest. If you know, Idaho's a little bit over from that, but if I could live out there, I would. I love it.
don't tempt me with a good time.
Yeah,
I'm on the East
yeah,
Coast now.
yeah.
So you got to Idaho.
Yep. And got my degree in computer science engineering, involved in ROTC, and took 4.5 years to graduate. Did my little summer cruises in between my college years, and again wanted to go aviation when I graduated. And at that time, that was in 1986, and that was
Oh wow.
before. Yeah, I'm older than I look, but
Oh,
but so I wanted to get into aviation. I wanted to fly, but I wore contacts, glasses, and um, even still at that time, that was before the combat exclusion law was repealed. So there
mm,
were very few billets available for women to fly. And I don't remember how many women pilots billets there were, but for women naval flight officers, there were 10 a year.
wow.
And there were none available when I graduated. And so I initially went to not Ford Island, but Whiting Field in Florida, near Pensacola, as a public affairs officer.
Really?
Yep, yep, loved it. I loved it. That was a great tour of duty. But midway in, I got a call from my detailer saying, "Hey, a billet opened up. Somebody dropped out before they started, and so do you want the billet to go to flight school?" And I said, absolutely. So I was able to start flight school. Yeah, it was, yeah,
So we're
great
talking
opportunity.
10. We're talking 10 billets a year, and none of them were for combat flying at the time.
No, no.
But in
So, yeah,
1993, you became one of the first women in U.S. history to join a combat flying squadron.
right,
How
right.
did how did it go from, okay, you're flying maybe a C-130 to what did you fly eventually?
So I graduated at the top of my class of flight school, and normally when you graduate at the top, you get your choice, or
Yeah.
you and the Navy work together for your choice. But there were only two squadrons I could go to at that point. One was in Key West, Florida, VAQ 33, and the other one was our sister squadron, VAQ 34, in Point Mugu, California. And so I ended up going to Key West, and I flew in the EA7 EA7 Lima, I think it was, and then the A6. And our mission at that squadron, we had a couple different aircraft in that squadron. We had A7s, A6s, P3s, and A3s.
Oh
And
wow.
our mission basically was to train the fleet as to what the enemy looked like. So we would fly enemy missile profiles, enemy radar profiles, and it was a huge squadron. And there were several women, but there was mostly men in the squadron. But it was absolutely frustrating for us, the women, because we joined the military to fly in combat.
Yeah.
Just to be, if you're qualified and you graduate and you get your wings, you want to do everything that everybody else is doing,
Or
basically.
at
And
least had the opportunity to.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, at least have a level playing field.
Yeah.
And and we can talk about this later, but in the middle of that tour, I was a young nugget flying A6s at that point, and ended up having a major aircraft emergency, and ended up ejecting out of an A6 over the Atlantic Ocean. And this past week was 31 years of that anniversary. And the pilot and I, every year, contact each other, whether it's email, social media,
Sure.
and just say, "Hey, happy anniversary! Thank God, we're here."
No
So
kidding. That had to be a traumatic event.
yeah, you know what? I'm more afraid of it looking back now because at that point I'm young,
No
didn't
fear.
have a family. Yeah, you're stupid. You're like you're young and like you're fearless.
Yeah, yeah.
And you just go through the training. The military trains you so well that you just go through your training. And but I was the first woman to eject in a Martin Baker seat, which is one of the primary ejection seats that the military uses. And I've kept in contact with them for years, and they give the guys, when you eject, they give you a tie. But for the first woman, they said, "Hey, do you want a tie?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't care anything." But what they did was they made this special little pewter pin for me, and they wanted to present it to me from over in England because they're a British company, and they wanted to have it presented by Princess Diana.
Oh, wow.
And the military, and there were at that point 6,000 ejections, so they wanted to have the person who was the 6,000 ejectee and me, this is during Desert Storm, come over to England and receive the tie or the pin from Princess Diana. And the military said no, they wouldn't let us go. And I would have loved that opportunity. They don't want you
Sure.
standing up in front of a company endorsing, how that is in the military sometimes. But yeah.
Interesting.
So, I so at that time period, I was able to transition. This was around the same time period that the combat exclusion law was being repealed, and I was able to transition to a combat squadron in Whidbey Island, Washington, flying in the EA-6B, the Prowler.
Okay.
Yeah, and that
Gotcha.
was yeah, I cruised on the USS Abraham Lincoln, the first West Coast boat with women on it. So that was quite an interesting experience. So
Sure,
yeah.
sure. Um, you know, Darlene Iskra, I interviewed her here on Born the Battle as well. Not only because her and I share a unique last name, and I was like,
Yeah,
you
I
know,
know her, yeah, yeah.
yeah, but because she was one of the first female dive officers, she became
Yeah,
the first female to ever captain a ship. It seems like you and her served in unique positions at unique times in history. Um, how did you and you kind of alluded to it? How did you handle being one of the first females to fly in a combat zone? Was there any unique adversity? And if so, how did you manage it?
um, it you definitely were living your life in a fishbowl, and I think if I
What do you
would've
mean by that?
um, because there's so few of you, and and it was almost like we were not allowed to make the same mistakes, or this, it was viewed differently than the guys. And I hate to say that even, but it was, and I wish I knew what I know now. I would have handled it completely differently. And I think when you're young and you don't know the whole world is watching you really. Like
Yeah.
you don't have that perspective, that maturity. Some women did. I didn't, you know. And I tended to wear my heart on my sleeve, and I think I took it personally that
Mm,
they didn't want us there. They hated some of them, and then when I say they, many of the guys were wonderful. They were awesome, but there was a small group that really made our life hell. And and they let us know that they didn't want us there.
mm,
And but it was, I mean, even still, even with all those challenges of kind of living your life in a fishbowl and a lot of focus on the women, it still was an amazing opportunity. I wouldn't change it for anything.
it,
And
it's made you
just
who you are. It's part
yeah,
of your story.
yeah, great life
Um,
lessons. And I say this all the time, that I could never repay the military for the opportunities that it gave to me as both an American, a citizen, and as a woman. I mean, and I love the military. I'm thankful that there are people, men and women, that are willing to serve.
yeah, yeah. I mean, adversity comes in all forms, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's faces challenges in their life. Some are different than others. It's just you were able to face your adversity in a very unique time in history, and I thank you.
Yeah.
And there had to you talk about kind of the pressure of not almost having to be perfect, being one of the first ones. There had to be extra eyes from on high that you may not have even realized at the time, mixed with those realities that were on the ground.
Yeah, and I mean, there were some interesting things that happened. Obviously, there was Tailhook, that caused a lot of, eyes on
What
the aviation community in
what's
general.
tailhook?
You don't know what Tailhook is?
Absolutely not.
Seriously. So look it up.
Okay.
You're no, but let me tell you, if
Yeah.
you Google
Cliff Notes
Tailhook,
version. Cliff Notes
so
version.
Tailhook is an organization that's for aviators, and so they have, and they do a lot of great things. They have the Tailhook magazine, and they have an annual conference
Okay.
in Vegas. And I don't know if you know the name Paula Coughlin, but
No.
she was a Navy helo pilot. And this all kind of, the lid blew off Tailhook from one of the Vegas conferences because a lot of things went on, like women were assaulted, a lot of women
Oh my gosh.
aviators and civilian women. There was a lot of drinking, and yeah, I mean, if you Google Tailhook,
Okay.
it'll come up.
So
It was,
it
I
was a
think,
big controversy
91.
at the it was a big controversy at the time.
Oh, absolutely,
I'm
absolutely.
sure.
And
Yeah.
but that was the same time period that they were debating of whether they were going to repeal the combat exclusion law, and so it caused even more, consternation and
Reservations.
negativity towards women aviators. Like, we were almost blamed for Tailhook, and some people will say that the Navy tried to cover it up, and but a lot of people lost their careers, and a lot of guys lost their careers fairly or unfairly because of Tailhook. And so it was just kind of an ugly time in the Navy specifically.
Sounds turbulent.
Yeah, it was. It was. And then right after that is when the combat exclusion law was repealed and women started deploying on aircraft carriers. And I was on the Lincoln, and there were a group of us that knew each other from those support squadrons. And one of them, her name was Kara Hultgreen. She was the first woman F-14 pilot, good friend of mine. I actually watched her plane go down the day that she died in October of 19, I think it was 94. And her Rio, her backseater, they both ejected, but her backseater made it out and she didn't. She ejected basically into the ocean. They found her body on the ocean floor about 6 weeks later.
Damn.
And so then that caused even more, you know, um,
Are we
issues because people were saying she's not qualified. I mean, she was a typical nugget. She did something that, another nugget, many other aviators have done before.
man or
And
woman? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so it was a difficult cruise. It was a very difficult cruise because there was a lot of media attention.
Yeah.
And so it was, yeah, it definitely was a turbulent time, and I keep in touch with many of those women. As a matter of fact, I'm going to see a handful of them next month at the Women in Aviation Conference in Nashville, because the Women Military Aviator Conference always meets up at the same time too. And so a bunch of us are going to get together and just, yeah, we've kept in touch for years. So
You're talking to Ollie about all these places: Hawaii,
I,
Vegas, Nashville,
I know.
all amazing places, all
Yeah.
great places. You talk about that turbulent time. Were
Yeah.
there any mentors or maybe a best friend that helped you
Mm.
through your career?
So one mentor that I will call out is Captain Rosemary Mariner. And she passed away, I think it
That's
was
such a Navy name.
yeah, she was in the first class of 7 women um, aviators that were the first class of women aviators. And that was back in 1973 that went to Navy flight training. And she was the commanding officer of that sister squadron in Point Mugu that I mentioned earlier. And she definitely was a mentor. I mean, eh, she just provided great, she was very um, smart and very measured, and she was just a great mentor, and she wasn't emotional about it, and she would give great advice, and she would um, to all the women. And she was a mentor of both men and women, but she passed away a couple years ago, and many of us went to her funeral. And they had a all female, all women flyover with F-18s. I think it was all F-18s,
Wow.
and that was pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And just to know that she was paved that way,
Yep, she
for-
absolutely paved that way, and, yeah, appreciate her, and, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
amazing.
But there were men, I mean, there were a couple men along the way that were great mentors, and, But, I mean, you definitely, need those kind of people speaking into your life along the way. And
Sure.
yeah, I'm a real big proponent of those relationships and mentorship. And everyone needs that, to kind of guide them along the straight and narrow.
Everyone needs the Mr. Miyagi, you know? Everyone
Yeah,
needs the mentor to help guide your way, absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Another previous guest, Air Force veteran Graciela.
I know her very well. She and I've known each other for years.
Really?
Yes,
Really?
she.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Great
So
interview.
yeah.
If you ever get a chance, if you're listening to this, listen to her interview. It's a great
I
interview.
did, I listened to it. I did.
Oh,
She sent
okay.
me a link, as she and I have known each other for 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. She's great. She was one of the first crews to serve in the no-fly zone over the Gulf in the '90s. It's a mission that you had as well.
Yep,
I see you received an air medal for that. It
yep.
was an award that was initially denied to her.
Oh, wow, I
Entire
didn't
crew,
know that. I
yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah. It was denied to her entire crew due to the policy that women at the time weren't allowed to be serving in content or in combat
Yeah,
content.
yeah,
A lot of drama that but the Air Force eventually did rectify it. It's a great story in our archives again, and I implore you if you're listening to this to listen to it.
yep,
But I haven't. If you, I see again. I see you received an air medal for the same
yep,
operation.
yep.
Was there any difficulty in receiving it like Graciela?
No, not at all. If you
Okay,
flew, so many, flights, and I was over, on an aircraft carrier in the Gulf, in the middle of the summer. It was very hot. but,
gotcha.
but if you flew so many flights no fly zone, it was pretty automatic. Yeah, there were no issues at all with that. But yeah, Grace and I. She reached out to me probably like 10 years ago, and she and I actually started this little women's speakers agency. There were like five of us, and we
Yeah.
were just like testing the waters to see what kind of interest there was for having women aviators. Were we all? I don't think we all were aviators. It was a mix,
Hmm.
but having women from the military to speak to different organizations. So
Gotcha.
yeah, but she and I have known each other forever. She's good people, and she has such, and you probably already know this, but she has a very interesting story. So her parents were from Mexico, but her husband is Japanese, I believe. So
Yes.
her name is
Sato.
Graciela Tiscarano Sato. So
Yes.
yeah, what a great
Yep.
diverse,
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just wondered about that air medal because again, and maybe again, different services, maybe different
Yeah,
time
yeah.
frames. Maybe the Navy at the time saw what the Air Force was doing, was like, yeah, we're not going to go that direction.
Well, it might have been before the combat exclusion law was repealed, but I don't know. But when I
Yeah.
flew, it was the law was already changed, and yeah,
I think it was before the exclusion
yeah,
law, so that
yeah,
was so very good. Again, very interesting story. I saw the same medal, kind of went there.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so you did 20 years.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst to making the decision to get out after 20?
So I probably at year 16, I had switched from the aviation designation over to what was called Aerospace Engineering Duty Officer. And that's where you were involved in acquisition, upgrading of aircraft and systems. And at that point in my career, I had a choice. It was like a why in the road, which way would I go? And I could either go back to my community, to the aviation squadron community, and go through the department head, executive officer, commanding officer route,
Sure.
or I could switch to this new community, and you had to apply to it. I got accepted. And so the thing for me, and I was in my 30s at that point, I was not married, I did not even have a boyfriend.
Wow. Career.
I Yeah, and it wasn't for lack of trying really, but it's just the way that it was working out.
Yeah.
And so it's hard too to have long distance relationships when you're moving around the military.
Pre social media.
Yeah, yeah, thank God in a way. they pre- but I so I I knew that I wanted to have a family, and
Yeah.
in my heart I wanted to have a family, and I couldn't imagine having this great career and nothing else. And it wasn't enough for me.
Yeah.
And even though I was appreciative of a great career, and I just wanted to have a family and I wanted to have kids. And I was stationed in DC at that point in a desk job, and it was a hard choice. Many people said, "You are killing your career. What are you doing?" By denying, not going back. You had to basically sign a letter saying that you weren't going to go back
Yeah.
to,
Flying.
yeah, to a department head tour.
Yeah.
And I spent a year. I remember like praying about it, like I wish I could just wake up a year from now and look back on the decision that I made and that it was the right decision.
Yeah.
And I just took a leap of faith. I just jumped off the cliff, but I knew in my heart it was the right decision for me. And within the next year, I'd met my husband. He was living in Boston. What had brought us together is he was a private pilot. He was a flight instructor also. He doesn't do that anymore, but we kind
Yeah.
of had that in common. And we actually met on social media. So we met on this dating app, and I tried it out for a couple weeks, and I went, "Oh, this is not for me. I can't do this." Like, I wasn't a blind dater. Like, I cannot, like,
Sure.
it just,
Yeah.
like, the thought of it just freaked me out. But I'd met him, and we literally probably kept in touch for a year and a half, like maybe every couple months. And he said, she's not available. Cause I'd be like, "Hey dude, how's it going?" That was like the extent of my,
Conversation.
email court. Yeah. 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 I wasn't ready, obviously.
Yeah.
And so, I remember he had sent me a note, or somehow I found out that he was over in South Africa diving, shark diving. And that kind of piqued my interest. I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool." So we got reconnected and ended up getting engaged, getting married. And at that point, I was stationed as an aerospace engineering duty officer, as an AEDO.
So at that point, you had made the decision to go
Yeah,
in
yep,
this
before
direction.
I even met him, before I
Yeah.
met him. And so I was stationed at Naval Air Station Patuxent River. So we got married, and I spent my last tour of duty at Pax River. And my husband moved down from Boston. He was able to do remote with his job, unbelievably. And yeah, I mean, but I just took a leap of faith, and and I've never regretted it. Having my
Sure.
kids has been
Sure.
absolutely the best thing I've done in my life.
I think you kind of speak to a decision I think a lot of women have to make. Everyone
Yeah.
talks about a glass ceiling. Well, part of that glass ceiling is a choice there that's family or career sometime in your 30s. And I think a lot of women have to make that decision. And
Mhm.
men too. But I think a lot
Mhm.
of times it's as do I want to be a mother or do I want to focus on my career? And those choices are made around that time.
Mhm.
Um,
And in the military, it's even harder
yeah,
because it isn't like you're working for a corporation and you can kind of balance it and maybe
yeah.
take Fridays off. Or in military, you can't say that. You can't say, "I'm going to take Friday off and I'm going to work remote." You can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what I like about your story is that, you had to make that decision at that point, but
Hmm.
you've also found a way to break through the ceiling in a different avenue in your transition. Like
Yeah.
it's not just because you made that decision doesn't mean that that was the end of your career. You just found a
Right.
different career where you could have both.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
think that's beautiful. Now you got out in 2004. I actually came in 2003. So yeah, Tailhook, no idea.
Yeah.
No, yeah,
Yeah.
but the post military landscape has really been built anew, but not at that time. It was just early in those wars.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What was it like transitioning in 2004? Because I hear a lot of 2011, 2015.
Yeah. Yeah.
This was kind of early on
Yeah.
when I don't think the infrastructure is the same it was
Not like
definitely
it
different.
is now. Yeah. There's
Exactly.
so many organizations and people out there that really try to
Yeah.
help veterans. And
And the
so
VA has changed,
yeah,
everything's changed.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's so many great. I mean, you go on LinkedIn and you put in veteran, and it's like, there's a plethora of just great organizations and opportunities for veterans.
And mentors and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, when I know some folks struggle getting out. I had I was a new mom. I had my first son, the year I retired. And so I was ready. Like I loved my career, but I was ready to move on
Yeah.
to something else and something that I really wanted. And I was newly married, and So we stayed in the Pax River area. There were a bunch of defense companies down
Yeah.
there.
And at this time,
Navarre.
defense contracting was rolling.
Yes, 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 yes. You're right. And
Support the warfighter, post
yeah,
9/11.
yeah, yeah.
Here's a bunch of money,
Yep. Oh, it was crazy. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So I worked part-time, like 24, 30 hours for the next 10 years. I just worked part-time, and
Mm.
which was wonderful for me. And I made a good living too, you
Yeah.
know. And I was able to pick and choose, what I wanted to do. So I worked as a program manager, supporting different aviation programs.
Well,
And so I was able to be there for my kids. I had my next son 3 years after that. And but yeah, it was a great opportunity, and I wouldn't say I didn't miss it because I was surrounded by military
yeah.
down at NAS Pax River.
Yeah.
Um, we were down in Pax River for 11 years total, and we ended up moving up to Rhode Island. And then I went to work for NUIC, Naval Undersea Warfare Command, near the Navy base in Rhode Island, down in Newport. And that was a big change for me because that was all submarine kind of stuff and
Oh,
all brand new. Even though it was project management, I didn't love it. I didn't love that. But between my
different. Like I said,
yeah,
you're 10,000 feet in the air, 30,000 feet in the air.
yeah,
We're
yeah.
talking complete opposite. Absolutely.
Different landscape, different mindset. But between my time in Maryland at Pax River and my time in Rhode Island, I put this book together called Military Fly Moms, and I actually have it with me this morning. So this is it.
Mm,
And it took me 8 years to get this book together. And it is a collection of 70 women, aviators, all military services, every military service. And some of them are still active duty now. There was a mix of women that were active duty, retired, and then separated, got out before 20 years. And the book is a coffee table style book, all color pictures. And I just had this, like I'm a storyteller, or like I love
yeah.
to highlight women in the military because I always would get the question of who are you and why did you join and who are the women in the military, and you're okay but the rest of them, like we were a bunch of militant feminists, and I'm like, it could be
It's
your
it,
mom,
you
your
you
sister,
were
your
getting hit
neighbor.
with a narrative that you didn't see, and you had a passion to tell it.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So that was my passion for the book. And my husband was the one that actually encouraged me to write the book. And he was like, "Oh, he was talking to someone on a train once, and he was telling him about my story about ejecting, and she's like, "Oh, she should write her story." And I said, "You know what though? But my story is just one small piece of a bigger story."
Yeah.
And so that's what really spawned the book. And it the women all tell their story and talk about growing up and why they joined and what it was like to fly in combat if they flew in combat, what it was like to be a dual military spouse, if they
Yeah.
were, and how they managed those priorities of choosing whether to stay in or get out. And it was just a labor of love because you don't make a lot of money publishing, getting a book published. I probably lost money.
Sure. Now,
you know
well, it
But I
sounds like
loved it. I loved it. Yeah.
it was a passion that you wanted to push back on the narrative of militant feminist
Yeah.
of that you're like, no, these are just women that
Normal,
want,
everyday
yeah, yeah.
heroes, normal, everyday women that, they wanted to do the same thing the guys wanted to do.
Now you wrote that, if I did my research right, you wrote that in 2012.
It was published in 2012,
It was
but
published in
up
it was an
until then, it took
8 year.
me 8 when I
Yeah.
got out in 2004. Yeah, and it was in between having my kids and staying up late and, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Labor of love.
Oh,
What you mentioned publishing. What was it like? Because if you can believe it, that was a decade ago.
yeah, yeah,
Now it
yeah.
doesn't seem like it to me even. But the publishing game has changed a lot.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
Graciela has kind of alluded to it,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
she'll push back and she'll say, "Well, self-publishing is not real publishing. This is how you publish." She's her marketing mind.
She's so smart. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
she finds ways and that I
yeah.
can't even imagine. Yeah, yeah,
She has the book babies and all that stuff.
yeah.
But the publishing game's changed a lot with the onset of Amazon and
Mhm,
self-publishing.
mhm.
What was it like back then to publish a book? And is it the same? You think?
Um, it was just kind of the start of the whole self-publishing, quasi self-publishing, because you have these companies now that, like Amazon, it used to be CreateSpace, that I think they
Okay.
bought out CreateSpace, where it wasn't really self-publishing. They help you along, like you can pick and choose. You can pay for certain like editing or, helping them with the design. And
Oh, wow.
so
Is that the route you went?
so my strategies, one of the women in the book, she owned a publishing company called Tannenbaum Publishing. And her name is Connie Reeves. And she was actually living in Maryland near me, and she was kind of a mentor of mine in the book publishing world. And so I initially tried to get an agent. So I said, I'm going to give myself, because it could take you years,
Yeah.
to get your book published. And so I said I would give myself 6 months to find an agent. And then if that point I didn't find an agent, I would then start reaching out to publishing companies. And so I forget the name of the book, but it's now, it was a hard copy book then, now it's online, but it's every single agent in the world. You can put a filter in there and say, okay, put whatever genre and blah, 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 and it'll spit out all these applicable agents. And so, I would email these agents and, separately, because you can't really do a mass thing. They don't
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And so I could, letter after letter after letter of rejection, email of rejection.
Yeah.
And but it didn't deter me. I said, okay, at that point, I'm going to start reaching out to. And I went to to Barnes and Noble and looked at different books. Like there's some similar, not about women, but veteran related coffee table style books. Medal of Honor Winners is a beautiful book.
Mm.
And so I started,
Mm.
just researching different types of books and who their publishers were. And I started reaching out to those publishers. But I'm not a well-known author and, or, whatever.
This is before
And
social media where before you could build an audience
yeah,
already built in.
right.
Yeah.
So Connie and I, who owned Tannenbaum Publishing, she said, I'm going to publish your book.
Wow.
And so she used CreateSpace and did publishing on demand, print on demand type of model. And so that's how we did it. And I don't even know now how many books have been sold. So maybe probably 5,000.
Yeah.
And it's still on Amazon. And but I every now and then I'll buy myself a box of books and I'll give them away.
Sure.
And
It's a labor of love for you to help shape that narrative
all the
and
women
certain.
in the book, yeah, I'm really proud of it. So and they're great stories, and they're all different. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It doesn't sound like you wrote it to you went in it for money. You went in it for a specific purpose,
yeah, yep,
you
yeah,
know? Um, Previous guest, Dawn Halfaker, Dawn.
I know Dawn, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, I've
I
seen
know
her on
Dawn,
your website, and
yep,
we'll get into that in a sec.
yeah,
Instead of the government, I want to get back into defense contracting for just one
yeah,
second.
yeah.
Instead of government hiring her as an employee, she convinced them to hire her as a business. Was that the track that you started when you started owning a business? I'm assuming the first business you ever owned was defense contracting. Am I wrong in that?
So no, so I never
Okay.
owned a defense contracting company. I always was a contractor. And so my first business was Women Veteran Speakers. And I recently just closed the business down in December. I had it for 5 years. Grace was one of my speakers. So we
Yeah.
had women speakers, coaches, trainers, and COVID really negatively impacted our business. So 2 years
Sure.
ago, I was on track for it to be our best year yet. And so it just, things have definitely slowed down. Plus, it got to be a lot of juggling with my kids, and I
Yeah.
work a corporate job, and it just, it's like, was it worth was the juice worth the squeeze at that point?
Yeah.
And after COVID, and I decided, it was a hard decision, but I said, you know what, I'm gonna close the business down, because I'm also very involved. And how I know Dawn is, she's part of this veteran project that I'm a project manager for, called Proudly She Served. But
Yes.
no, I never owned a defense related company. But
Gotcha.
Dawn has had great success. As a matter of fact, she just sold her company
Yeah.
this past year. So yeah, very, very incredible stories.
you talk about public speaking. Do you miss public speaking? Do you want to get back into that? How did you get into that? Um, it sounds like it was something that you really enjoyed as we open back up, because it's got to be happening at some point, right?
Yeah.
Is that something you would want to go back into?
So I loved owning the business. I loved owning the business more than I liked speaking. Like I liked it kind of went in with my whole MO of like highlighting women, veterans.
Yeah.
And I said to my husband once, I said, I don't think I have anything else left to say. So I'm like, I've already said it all. I've already but I like putting other women forward. I
Yeah.
like highlighting them. So I mean, if someone asked me, absolutely I would. As a matter of fact, there was a senior citizen home that kept reaching out to me, and they were like an hour and a half away. They had no money, and I had a for-profit business, and so they didn't have any money to pay a speaker. And I said, you know what? I'll go down there and do it. And it was for Veterans Day. I took my 15-year-old son and we went down there. I love older people and
Me too.
I love sharing with them. I love talking with them. So I drove down there and I did it myself. And so, but it's not something I see myself doing, in the future, really.
Gotcha. Very
Yeah.
good. Well, you are the director of another project. It's called the Proudly She Serves
Mhm.
Project. Tell me how it came about, and the purpose that you see it serving. H-
Yeah.
and how is that project serving that purpose?
So it's called Proudly She Served. It's proudlysheserved.com. And about maybe 4 years ago, I got connected to Steve Halbert, who's an artist in New York City. And one of my speakers with Women Veteran Speakers, Melissa Washington, I don't know if you've heard of the Women Veterans Alliance. She runs that organization. She connected me with Steve. And so
Mm,
Steve calls me up in his New York accent. And he's like, tell me all about this project he wants to start. He had painted Dawn Halfacre. Speaking of Dawn Halfacre, he
yeah.
got connected. It's kind of full circle. He had gotten connected to Dawn. And at this point, he's been painting, doing military related paintings for probably like the last 10 years. And he had he's had a variety of doing different things in his career, in media. And so he painted Dawn and he said, I have this painting and I just think I need to do something with it or do something more with it. And so he and I started collaborating, but he was like I always tell him, he was like a little dog nipping at my heels because he wouldn't leave me alone. He kept coming back like, Steve, I don't have time for this, dude. I'm like, I'm so busy. I'm like, I don't have, I'm like, I want to help you. I think this is great, but I don't know if I'm the one. I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm like,
I'm
oh,
juggling here. I'm
yeah,
juggling here.
yeah.
I get that life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but he kept at it, and long story short, 4 years later, we have 12 paintings, and we're not doing any more. And
That was
they're
going to be one of my questions, because I saw what was on there, and I just
yeah,
wonder if you're doing
nope,
more.
nope.
Okay.
And so he is the executive director and the artist. I'm the project director. It's all
Yeah.
volunteer hours. We have a team of volunteers, great, great people. And so we have been trying to have a portrait unveiling and book launch. We're working on a coffee table style book that goes with the portraits for since COVID hit. So right
Mm,
now we've had to adjust our schedule. And I was just on a call earlier today about this, but we're shooting to have smaller exhibits in different military museums this Veterans Day 2022, and
okay.
also reaching out to the state VA organizations to have an exhibit, whether it's a virtual exhibit or an on-site exhibit.
Okay.
And but we're hoping to have the official portrait unveiling and book launch in 2023. And we're working with Liz Estabrooks from the Women Veterans Center at the VA to team with them with the I Am Not Invisible project also.
Very good.
Yeah. And so a lot of great collaboration. But the whole purpose of the project eh, are these portraits of women veterans. Some are well known, some are everyday heroes. Like a couple of them that are very well known is Senator Tammy Duckworth,
Yep.
Nicole Malkowski, who's the first woman Thunderbird pilot, Kirstie Ennis is another one who's well known, and then there's women, and Dawn Heffaker, Dawn is well known also,
Yep.
but then there's other women who are, just everyday heroes. Another woman that is probably well known is Bee Haydu, is one of the women Army Air Force service pilots. She just turned 100 years old last year and
Oh,
died in
wow.
January. Yeah, and but Steve, great. So how it worked out is that I connected Steve with many of the women, and he would go to where they were. They would come to him, and he would meet them, talk with them, and take pictures, and then do their portrait. And um, he was not able to meet B, and but we got photographs of her, and he had her up on his easel painting her when she passed away, and her daughter sent Steve a note and said, "I'm so happy my mom was able to spend some time with you." On
Wow.
the easel in his studio, and it was just, it still gives me the chills thinking about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but
Wow.
just, and so the whole purpose of the project, it's a couple things. One is obviously to highlight women in the military, whether they're still active duty. We have a couple that are still active duty, or veterans. Another is to encourage people, both young men and young women, to serve.
Hmm.
And we have a coffee table style book that's going to go with the portraits. And the women tell their stories, the portrait participants tell their stories, but they also talk about why it's important to serve, and how, if they're not in the military still, how they've continued to serve. So one of the, missions is to encourage our young people to consider the military as an option, but even not, if they don't, to consider serving in some way, in some capacity,
Yeah.
whether it's in the military or not in the military. And, when we want to encourage young women, to reach for the stars, and to see that these women, everyday heroes, did such amazing things, and that they can also. So, there's a lot of different things going on with the portrait series. Plus, it's an art, it's an art.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
A life of service is a life worth living,
Yeah,
100%. And I think,
absolutely.
finding your purpose, helping others, I think that's where people really start, to really find what you be able to get meta about in the meaning of life.
Yeah.
Um, another purpose I saw in there was, it talks about raising the awareness of challenges many women face when transitioning into life outside the military.
Yeah.
Um, so that kind of led me to this question: what unique challenges are there concerning women veterans when they transition?
Um, you know what? I think that this is for both men and women. I think a lot of times when people leave the military, they can't f- bridge how their military experience translates
Yeah.
to um, corporate America, or other areas. And and I have found that actually it's not untrue, because a lot of times, um, in different companies, they don't see your military experience, your leadership,
Yeah.
as translatable. Because you may not have been with that company and grew up in that company for 10, 20 years, your service before is not considered valuable or translatable, and that's frustrating
Big time.
to me. And
Yeah.
I think that it's a battle that we continually fight. You
Oh,
know,
100%. 100%.
I see it in my current career,
Yeah.
that there's folks that have been with that company, forever. That's the only thing that they've done,
Yeah.
and I'm bringing all this experience, and I'm maybe coming in at a lower level than them, you
Because they
know.
don't know, yeah, exactly, the minutia of where you came from, and how you've had this lived experiences in multiple different arenas, and how you can
But it's up
contribute,
to you also to
communicate it.
communicate that. And
Yep.
so, like, I have done mentoring with young women before on taking civilianizing their resume, and taking their experience and making it translatable,
Yeah.
and to a corporate job. So I think that's one area
Yeah.
that both men and women face. um I don't know if I see it so much nowadays, but I've seen it in older women veterans who don't consider themselves veterans, and they don't call out their military service. And I've had women say, I spoke at a conference in Florida, a one veterans conference a couple years ago, And several of the women said, I just started acknowledging my veteran service out loud. And I'm like, but why not? Like, I'm so proud of it. Like, I'll tell
Yeah.
anybody. Like, I think, um, and when people find out you're a veteran, they're like so interested in that. And especially as a woman. So I
Yeah.
would encourage women who are in the military and getting out to say, to acknowledge it, that they're veterans.
Yeah, I think that's a lot with the older generation as
Yeah,
well.
I do too.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if it like, I've had combat nurses on. They're like, "Well, I just saw myself as a nurse, not as a veteran." I was like, "Well, it's why you had a uniform."
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it's women or if it's just that older generation is like, if I didn't serve in combat, I have no
Yeah.
idea what it is, but it's definitely something that I encourage with you as well.
Yeah.
Your project talks about one of its goals is to offer transition support
Hmm.
and helping handle women veterans as they define their post-military goals.
Right.
And we're talking about paintings, right? Art, trying to serve a pretty big purpose.
Hmm.
But hey, as a video producer, now as a podcast host, I can recognize art and how art can help facilitate inspiration in their life. That's kind of one of the goals of this podcast is to
Yep.
hear some of my guests and go, well, if they can do it, so can I, because we have the same story. Um, how is this art trying to fulfill the goal of helping women veterans define their post-military goals?
Well, first of all, it's highlighting. I mean, I think there's already a big focus on women veterans, but it's to expand, that um, letting sometimes people in middle America, if don't know who women veterans are,
Mm,
and so we're just trying to shine a light on who women veterans are, and also for the women themselves, to just show them that first of all we're grateful for their service, and to encourage them with these women, with this art, that these women continue to serve even if it's not in the military, after the military, and that if they can do it, you can do it. And also part of um, the project is to raise funds. So we would love to give a scholarship. That's like a long-term goal of
sure.
the project, is to give a scholarship to a deserving woman entrepreneur. And so when we have the portrait unveiling and book launch, one of the goals for that is to be able to award a scholarship to one or even more women veteran entrepreneurs. And so that's, something that we want to go to in the long run.
So is it a scholarship you like to go to school, or is it more of a grant for their business?
Either.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
either.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good.
That's still in the works right now. It's still on paper. And so, yeah, we're still trying to figure that out.
Gotcha. But that's a
Yep.
goal. That's very
Yep.
good. Very good. Um, Leonard, what's one thing that you learned during your time in service, in your time in the military, that you apply to what you do today?
Hmm. Um, that relationships matter. And I know that sounds funny, but when I remember as a young lieutenant, being on the aircraft carrier as a division officer, I would um, go down to my shop's spaces in the morning and in the evening to visit those folks. Because, as you know, as a young enlisted person, they make very little money.
Yep.
And so what is it that's going to motivate them and inspire them to do a good job and to work hard, especially in a very dangerous environment on aircraft carrier, with turning jets up on the flight deck. And what is it? And
Liberty and alcohol. I'm sorry. Excuse me. It just
yes.
popped out. I'm back.
Well,
Okay.
besides that,
No.
unless you're on the boat and you're just on Liberty and you're out there for a lot. So, but I just thought, when I would go down and we would just shoot the breeze, we just
Yeah.
go down there, shine our boots. And, I would, say, hey, how's it going back home? What are you doing, on the boat to, in your free time? You're going to school. Just like express an interest in them and value them. And I learned at a very young age, it didn't matter what level that you were at, that you needed to value people, and people really, especially though that situation, They really appreciated it, and I remember my senior chief would say, "Lieutenant, you don't need to be going down there. I got it covered. We're good." I'm like, "You know what, though? I do, though." You
Yeah.
know? And I remember when I left the boat, they gave me a tail hook, and it which is like 50 pounds. They throw them away after you get so many traps on the boat, and, but I still have that tail hook, down in
Yeah.
my basement, and I've taken it to schools and showed it to kids, and,
And there's memories associated with looking at it,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah, I'm gonna hang it on my wall at some point in the future. Um, but so I learned that to value people, and I've taken that with me in every single job I've had, and to get to know the people not only on a professional level, but just ask, "Hey, how are you? How are things going?"
Yeah.
And so that's probably the one thing that really stands out to me, and to never and don't take the word no. If
Yeah.
you want something, you will find a way to get it. You just, reach out to the same people. Just a recent situation for me, I wanted to transition to a new role in my company. And I said to myself, every single day, I'm going to reach out to a different person and say, "Hey, how's it going? Hey, just to let you know, I'm gonna be looking for a new role in the next 6 months. If you know anything, let me know."
Mm.
And so I'm now in that new role now.
Good, good.
So
What
yeah.
is it? What are you doing?
So I work for Verizon, and I've been with Verizon for 3.5 years. And my spouse also works for Verizon. So I'd always worked for defense companies, but we had moved to New Jersey, and there were no defense companies near where I live. And so I finished up my MBA and started looking around, and yeah, started with Verizon I'm working as a program manager. I was in supply chain, and I'm now more in a technical area.
Do you know, Karn Schultz? She
No,
Okay, we'll talk
Karen
after.
Schultz. Karen, what's her name?
We'll talk after. I think, I
Okay.
gotta look up Ned. She was one of my release authorities when I was in, one of my last deployments. So for any of my imagery, she now works for Verizon, and, we'll talk after. We'll talk after.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Linda, has there been a veteran whom you've known, or in the community, or veteran nonprofit within the veteran community, whom you've had an experience with, or whom you'd like to mention?
So there is a project called Uniting Us, and I don't know if you know Anne Marie Halterman,
Nope.
and it's an art related nonprofit, and she features art by veterans throughout the country, like in airports, and yeah, just a really great. I mean, she really works hard. She's done amazing things. And then also, I want to call out Liz Estabrooks at the VA Women's Veteran Center. They are doing really great things too for women veterans too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, benefits breakdown in the archives on the Women's Veteran Center if you get a chance to check it out.
Yep.
Well, Linda, we've gone on for an hour.
I know it's gone so fast.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it.
I
Never
know.
does. Is there anything that I've missed or haven't asked, or maybe is there a parting shot to anybody that might be listening to this that you'd like to share?
Um, I think you covered it all. I really do.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I
gotcha.
really appreciate you too. I know it's taken a long time for us to get
Yeah,
together, and
yeah.
I really I'm glad you didn't forget about me.
No, absolutely not. No,
You
absolutely
know?
not.
And I follow you on
Yeah.
social media, so yeah. And you have such a unique name, so it's hard to forget.
No, no. Yeah,
Mm.
it's hard to find me, but if you find me, I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much, Linda, for for telling your story, and
Oh,
for
absolutely.
joining
Yeah.
us here. And we are out. Have a good
All
one.
right.
We gotta get 'em one way or the other. Machine gunner. Firefight, bullets fly, day and night rain. Simplify till we die another campaign. My desk is a rock where the drug lords cut up millions. My pen is a 7.62 round that'll cut 'em down in an instant. Point, click, pull the trigger to the tune of falling brass. Full benefits and a purple heart and a Russian-made bullet in my back. Raining down lead, punching that clock. Get 'em boys, I'm laying down cover. Machine gunner. bullets fly, day and night rain. Semper Fi, do or die, another campaign. Here we go, lock and load, 0331, lug 1,000 rounds, and I ain't bringing back one.